I grew up in a place in Pennsylvania where Lyme disease, other tick-borne illnesses, I shouldn't say the other ones because those really aren't known, but let's just say illness from ticks and other things like that are extremely common. People don't really know what to do with it, though. I would imagine there are thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people in my county alone who are walking around with long-term complications from these things without knowing it, or they did know it and took just the antibiotics and then thought, okay, I'm going to be fine. And some issue they have 5 to 10 years down the road, it's never connected. So if you don't already know what I'm talking about, I'll read our guest's bio here and we will get into the main topic. Nicole Bell is an author, entrepreneur, and advocate for tick-borne and neurodegenerative diseases. Her memoir, What Lurks in the Woods, details her husband's harrowing experience with misdiagnosed tick-borne illness and seeks to help others navigate chronic conditions. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Nicole earned a bachelor's and master's of science in materials science and engineering from MIT and a master's of science in biomedical engineering from Duke University. So I'm sorry it's not one of our more intelligent guests for you guys today. I hope that her credentials are okay. Nicole is currently the CEO of Galaxy Diagnostics, where she combines her professional experience with her passion to change the tick-borne disease landscape. Galaxy's mission is to create a new diagnostic standard of care for tick-borne diseases and save millions of people from descending into chronic illness. I could not think of a cooler thing to be hyper passionate about. So welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
All right, so I was checking your information, obviously, in the days leading up to this. And one of the things that we always ask to start off the show is what did the individual's health symptoms look like and where did they begin, or when did they begin? I'm sorry. But in this case, from my understanding, this was completely about helping your husband and figuring out what was going on with him. So I might switch the question to say, what did his health symptoms look like and when did those begin?
Yeah, so the when did it begin is a really interesting question that in retrospect I constantly debate. I think when I first noticed that there was a real problem was around 2016 timeframe, and it was really more mood based at first. So he was anxious, he was depressed, he was withdrawn, and he was a very social, outgoing individual, but his personality just really changed. And I thought that it was really more discomfort with our lifestyle. He had stepped back and retired early to take care of our young children. And I was like, please go back to work. This is not working for you. But then I realized that he was having cognitive issues, right? He was a brilliant engineer, electrical engineer, computer scientist, but all of a sudden he couldn't remember the time to pick up the kids from daycare. And he couldn't remember a 4-digit alarm code to our security system. And something is seriously wrong. And I actually suspected Lyme disease like out of the gate. I researched like random things like brain fog and cognitive issues, and Lyme disease came up. And that really resonated with me because he was a hunter, he was always in the woods, we had many tick exposures over the years, and he lived in several endemic areas. And in our first doctor's appointment, we had him tested, but he tested negative, which I can talk about more some of the challenges with testing because it's a big passion of mine now. And that threw us off the trail. And eventually, he was given a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's disease. And at the time that he got his PET scan, his scan showed that he was actually in the late stages of cognitive decline. So I was still trying to figure out something was really wrong more than just him being unhappy and depressed. And they were telling me he was in the late stages of Alzheimer's. So I was pretty much floored.
When you realize or get this new information, right? Like you're already knowing something's wrong, but now it's at a whole different level.
Yes.
What were some of the initial steps that you guys took? And I'm saying it this way because for you to even be interested in this topic of like kind of chronic illnesses and issues that happen with tick-borne illness, it's hard to not end up in this functional medicine or natural medicine space. It's certainly not exclusive to that because there is Western medicine interventions that can be useful for a lot of this, but usually they overlap. And the reason I'm saying it this way is because unless I'm wrong, based on your background so far, other than maybe a side passion or interest, I haven't heard anything to indicate that you guys would have been interested in these alternative medical treatments or options up until possibly now. So what were the first things that you even did when you heard this? Did you immediately jump into something more natural or did you follow a more conventional approach?
Our first doctor's appointment where we had that first test done, I actually went to an integrative physician because I just instinctively knew that the standard 15-minute appointment wasn't going to get us what we needed, right? Like he was outwardly extremely healthy, physically fit, but there were changes in him that I could see because I was so close to him. And I just knew that I needed somebody who was going to dive deep. And they did a whole panel of lab work, and I had literally 10 pages of lab results that said he was quote unquote normal. Right. And then they referred us to a neurologist. And so we did the neurologist bump around for quite some time. Literally saw several of them looking for answers because I'm an engineer by training, right? I like root causes. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I had him genetically tested. There were no genetic markers associated with Alzheimer's disease, no comorbidities, no lifestyle factors. Like he was eating a Mediterranean diet, all the things that you're supposed to do for brain health, he was doing it, yet he was declining young and very quickly. And I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense. And all the research that I dove into just, it didn't seem to fit. And so I raged against the machine for a while. And then actually, it was about 15 months after that first appointment where my brother actually was the one who convinced me to get him retested for and returned to tick-borne disease because my sister-in-law actually got diagnosed after years of her own health battles and found out that the root of her issue was tick-borne. And my brother's a doctor and he started researching. And so then at that point, I got him retested and found out not only that did he have Lyme disease, but he also had Bartonella and Babesia, which are two common co-infections. And from there, we sought out a Lyme literate physician, and we've been in the functional medicine and integrated functional medicine Lyme literate world ever since. Even with my kids who are healthy, other than to get the standard sports forms and so forth, we go straight to functional medicine because I truly believe that's a where you need to go not only when you're ill, but also just to maintain optimal wellness.
I promise that we'll have the opportunity to get into more of the technical information because most guests want to do that, especially one with your background. I'm guessing
Yeah.
you're like, I want to share some data with these people, but I'm also infinitely fascinated by people's stories. And there's one thing I wanted to go back to. You said it was about 15 months before your brother
Mhm.
recommended someone. Now, with where you're at now, 15 months is almost a matter of fact. I think about 15 months of someone dealing with these types of things, and I've dealt with my own chronic symptoms, right? I didn't get into this by accident. 15 months can be a very long time, depending on what's going on. So, can I ask what the heck was happening in that 15 months? Were you guys making any progress? I'm sure you were trying different things, but was any progress being made, or was this kind of becoming a hopeless situation for a little bit?
It was becoming a hopeless situation. I think for the first 6 to 7 months, I raged against the machine and went to doctor trying to get answers. And after 6 to 7 months, actually, it was Russ, my husband, who looked at me and he said, "Look, if this is gonna happen, we need to prepare, right? Like, we have young children. We need to really figure out how we're going to manage through this, how you're going to manage through this after I'm gone." And we began the process of acceptance, even though it still didn't make any sense just because we didn't have any alternative. And then I had to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to structure things? How are we going to manage? And we were doing the traditional dementia appointments where they just continue to track your decline. It's actually enormously depressing. And that was when my brother called. So I had given up hope and was planning for the worst. And we were given an olive branch really to say, okay, this is something that's treatable and this is something that we can do something about. And we did that for about 18 months. But as I said, even at the beginning of that 15 months, he was diagnosed with late stage Alzheimer's disease. So a lot of damage had been done. And late stage born illness, particularly when it's entrenched in your neural tissue, is difficult. And so his journey didn't end well and ended up going into a resident care facility in 2019 and then he passed away in 2022.